Well, our leadership has decided, as you may already know, that we need to delay the opening of our church until the first Sunday in September. And I'll be honest, I'm not real happy about that. To be honest, I really do dislike any kind of delay. Uh, I find it irritating when you order something online and then you get a message that says delivery delayed, or you get to the airport nice and early and you find out that your plane has been delayed or even canceled. I suppose I'm supposed to have back surgery sometime in the near future, but then I find out that it's going to be delayed and I'm going to have to live with this condition for I don't know how long. There are a few things in life that are more frustrating than being delayed. I'll do anything I can to avoid them. I stay away from certain streets and the highway during rush hours. I shop early in the morning because I don't like the delay of standing in lineups. I even tape football games because I don't like the delay caused by commercials. I don't think I'm alone in this. Much of the technology in our world is built around eliminating delays wherever we find them. From our perspective, things that slow us down and waste our time seem to have no real purpose but to hassle us or to cause headaches. And because of our impatience with delays, many of us have a problem with God because God does not hate delays. In fact, God often uses delays to help us in our lives as disciples. The life to which God has called us as disciples is full of delays, and there is no app or there's no life hack to help us avoid them. A delay for the believer is a time between the moment when God hears our prayers and answers them. A delay for the believer is a time between when God gives us a vision, maybe for our family or for our job or for our ministry, and when it is realized. Every time we set out to engage in what God has called us to be or to do, delay is part of the process for a reason. See, the important thing is not the delay for the believer. The important thing is how we respond to the delay, because delay plays a critical role in our growth as disciples of Jesus Christ. Our response to delay will determine if we will experience the blessing and power of God or not. The Bible gives us many examples of different ways people have responded to delay. Some of those examples are good, some of those examples are bad. For example, take Aaron and the golden calf and that incident that is recorded in Exodus chapter 32, verses 1 to 5. And here's what it says. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all of the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they had handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then he said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a fast to the Lord." You see, in delay, Aaron led the children of Israel into adultery. If Moses hadn't been there to intercede, they would have all died on that day. Though Moses managed to help them clean up this particular mess with God, their motives for mishandling the delay, what was behind it, the thoughts, the ambitions remained unchanged, and they continued to complain and rebel until God declared that they were disqualified from entering the promised land. That generation never fulfilled their calling. They never experienced the promise and blessing of God. Instead, they died in the desert. And then there's another story, the story of Saul making sacrifice without Samuel. And you can read that story in 1 Samuel. He did this after learning the Philistines had amassed this mighty army of 6,000 chariots and countless soldiers. With his soldiers trembling in fear, Saul managed to hold them together with Samuel's promise that he would come in 7 days to make the required sacrifice to bless the army and inquire of the Lord as to what their strategy should be. When the 7 days passed and Samuel hadn't come, Saul called the people together because they were starting to scatter. In this delay, Saul became desperate, took matters into his own hands, and made the sacrifice. No sooner had he finished the job than Samuel arrived to tell Saul that he had made a serious mistake and the consequences would be serious. So in 1 Samuel chapter 13, we read these words, verses 13 and 14. We read this: You have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler over his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. In the delay, Saul fell into disobedience, and the cost was severe. He lost the promise and blessing of God. On the other hand, you have the story of David. It stands in direct contrast to the stories of Aaron and Saul. David was that man who was after God's own heart that Samuel talked about. But David experienced a 13-year delay between his anointing as king and his ascension to the throne. During that time, David had many opportunities to take into his own hands the promise of God and claim his throne, but every time he refused. As a result, God established his royal dynasty eternally, even choosing to bring his own son into the world through David's line. These stories show us that there is a significant consequence for us in how we handle delay. In the case of Aaron, Saul, and David, the consequences were extreme, as they were all leaders whose decisions affected millions of people. But the test was the same in all three. Aaron and Saul found themselves surrounded by terrified people, pressuring them to act, and they caved in to the fears. David also was pressured by his men to take Saul's life when he had the chance, but he feared God more than he feared man, and he didn't give in. No matter who we are, this is the test we will face in delay. Either to take matters into our own hands according to our own strength, own resources, own ways, or trust God, or trust in him and allow him to direct our path. In the delay, we see what is in our heart. Do we fear man or God? Will we trust ourselves or God? Do we have to be in control, or do we want God to be in control? Only in the delay do these things rise to the surface so we can deal with them and make the right choices to align our heart with God's heart for us. And there's one more story of delay that I think is really important and really instructive to us. And that's the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Now, you remember Lazarus and his sister Mary and Martha were some of Jesus' closest friends and disciples. They had seen Jesus do amazing things. They had seen Jesus heal and do miracles. But when Lazarus fell ill, Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus, fully believing that he would come and heal their brother without delay. John's account emphasizes that Jesus loved these people. We read in John chapter 11, verses 1 and verses 3 and 5, this. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. So the sister sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus, it says, loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. What took place next did not make sense to anyone in this story. Jesus says in John chapter 11, verse 6, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. During that delay, Lazarus died. It is clear that Jesus intentionally delayed 2 days. Sometimes we think that these seasons of delays in our life is an attack by the enemy, not realizing that God is involved in the delay, as we see here. But by the time Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Everyone was confused. Mary and Martha each ran out to meet Jesus, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And the onlookers at the tomb were asking, as we see in verse 37 of John 11, could not he open the eyes of the blind? Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying? You can practically hear the thoughts and questions behind the response. We thought he knew Jesus. They thought he knew Jesus. We thought you cared. We thought you were all powerful. We thought you would have the same urgency to fix this problem and want the same outcome as we have. But your delay is making us question all that. What you let happen in the delay is making us wonder, do you really care? Are you all powerful? Why would you let this happen? When God does not seem to share our urgency about a situation, many of us start to question his character. Seasons of doubt expose just how easy it is for us to move from trusting God to doubting God because of his timing is not our timing. When we experience a delay, truths that we once seemed unshakable to us suddenly become questionable. Is God really good? Does he really care for me? Can he really fix this situation? Why is he letting this happen? John's accounts show us, and it's important to note that John's account shows us how Jesus answered those unspoken doubts. But we know that Jesus was not cold. He was not disconnected. He was not affected by the requests, the prayers of Mary and Martha, who loved him. John tells us that Jesus was deeply moved and wept, as John records in John chapter 11. And when he called Lazarus from the tomb, they all saw he was far more powerful than they could even imagine. God did more than they could imagine or think in this situation. We personally may be in the midst of a season of delay. and believe that God doesn't care about us or about our situation. But nothing could be further from the truth. God sees and cares deeply about the things that are on our hearts. And then there is the question, why? Why this delay? Why did Jesus delay? And Jesus answers this question as we see in John chapter 11, verses 14 and 15. He told his disciples plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there. Why? So that you may believe. Jesus said to her, he's talking to Martha, later on in that portion of scripture, Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. She knew her theology, believed that Jesus was talking about the final resurrection. And Jesus said, no, I want you to understand something, Martha. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? That's what Jesus asked her. And she replies, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. And Jesus says this, did I not tell you that if you believe in me, you will see the glory of God? So they took the stone away. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always heard me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. That's what Jesus says, or is recorded what Jesus said in John chapter 11, verses 40 to 42. This is why, or this is the why of Jesus' delay, that they may believe. Jesus was trying to get them to a place of greater faith, to grow as disciples, to understand more deeply and significantly who he was. And it's the same why he gives us in our delays. When things are taking longer or not turning out the way we thought they should, Jesus' answer to our why is, trust me. Do not lean on your own understanding, as the proverb says, but trust in God, and he will direct your path. He will make your path straight. We're all experiencing a period of delay right now. And what's important is how we handle this delay. Do we handle it with doubting or trusting? And you may be personally experiencing a time of delay in your life right now. You're praying for your family. You're praying for some medical situation that you want to change, that you believe needs to change. You're putting your request before God. And because there is a delay, you are questioning God. Is God really good? Does he really care about me? Can he really fix this problem? Why is he letting this happen to me? And you know what? These doubts are understandable. There's nothing in the Bible that teaches believers cannot doubt, and that believers will doubt from time to time. And we see examples of it throughout the scriptures. But we need to remember that God is using this delay to strengthen us. You know, we're delayed as a church in opening up. And there's a part of me that is really panicking about this and thinking we just need to get moving forward. We need to be opening up our church. It's going to be disastrous, not only for our church, but many other churches if we don't open soon. But you know something? I've really had to sit back and say, am I trusting God or am I trusting me? Am I going to do it His way or my way? Am I going to accept His timetable or insist upon my timetable? Do I really trust Him, or do I just simply doubt Him in these times? And that's a challenge for all of us in times of delay. I don't know what your delay is, but I believe that we need to trust God and trust His timetable and trust His strength in these times of delay. May God bless you this week and as you deal with those challenges in your life.